Leadership is tested most when pressure is highest. When crisis hit, people look for calm, clarity, and direction. Today, we're talking about what church leaders can learn from one of America's most demanding leadership roles. I want to welcome you to the Faith Secure podcast, where we are watchful, prayerful, and prepared. I'm Dr. Michael Brown, and I'm your host. And I am absolutely thrilled today to have as our guest Chief Michael Moore, retired 57th Chief of Police of the Los Angeles Police Department. Chief Moore led one of the largest and most complex law enforcement organizations in the nation through periods of crisis, public scrutiny, public safety challenges, and organizational transformation. Today's conversation focuses on leadership, crisis decision-making, community trust, and what church leaders can learn from high-pressure public safety leadership. Welcome to the podcast, Chief.
It's great to be here, Doctor. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, no problem at all. We're going to dive right in if you're okay with it, sir.
Absolutely. Let's get going.
Okay. Our first segment, we're going to deal with leadership under pressure. And the opening question, Chief, is what does leadership look like when the stakes are high and people are looking to you for answers?
Well, it looks like a tightrope at times, and it can be a bit perilous. But I think a leader in those moments, if they've properly prepared themselves and they've dug into reflection and understanding the challenges and opportunities and responsibilities of their position, can enter that foray, in that arena, if you will, with a certain level of confidence that they can move, that they will, and the organization will progress on a path that will perhaps have others critical or challenging them, but a path that fulfills the mission and shows the values of the organization in which they're charged with leadership. That gives their people confidence, that reinforces the importance of the work that they do, that challenges them to rise to that occasion, and that is, in a moment, providing as much transparency as possible to the public about what those challenges are and what the plan is going forward.
That's a great point. So let me ask you, how do leaders stay calm in crisis situations? How did you do it?
I don't know that I always did it. I use the analogy of a duck on a lake.
Okay.
Water, it looks like the individual's just there paddling along and moving about. But underwater, under the surface, you're working your butt off. You're doing a lot of different things at once. The other aspect of this is in that moment of crisis, in that time of great turmoil, is what have you done to prepare yourself, to prepare the organization? What team do you have? And your ability to rely upon them and encourage them to join with you and you with them in moving forward in a manner that, again, gives your people confidence that this is a challenge. You acknowledge the difficulties that are ahead. You even may acknowledge, if necessary, the losses that you've even incurred, perhaps an injury or a loss of an officer, for instance, in the midst of turmoil. I remember the days of the civil unrest in 2020, and very perilous and uncertain times. But what was important for me was to be out in front, to demonstrate as I communicated with the public through the media. I was also recognizing that as I communicated with them, I was communicating with the rank and file and with the leadership of the organization. And so the message in each instance, regardless of internal or external, was one of calm, of confidence, of determination, of Winston Churchill. And that is that you never give up. You stay determined. You stay on the mission. The North Star, no matter how bad the storm is, the North Star has not moved.
That's right. So now, on that same vein, what leadership mistakes become costly under pressure?
When you lose your ears, meaning that you lose focus of understanding what is it that with that determination, with that confidence, with that push forward, what are you missing? And demonstrating a humility and a willingness and a desire and an expectation that you have critics around you and those that you're going to pay attention to and understand their perspective. You may not agree with their perspective, but how does your plan address their concerns? Their perception is really their reality. And so
absolutely,
you may feel a whole different reality, But your obligation as a leader during those times is to recognize it, acknowledge it. You don't have to agree with it, but you need to ensure that the path you're going forward is attempting to address shortfalls and address the concerns of the people that you serve.
Oh, that's well said, sir. That's well said. Let's pivot. You answered that so thoroughly. We're going to move on to the next subject.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we're going to talk about building trust before crisis happens. Okay. How important is trust before an incident ever occurs?
It's the entire ball game. Trust is built every single day, and it's lost in a moment. I see it as a reservoir that every day, every action, everything that you do whether you're a leader of a church or an assembly or a leader of an organization, whether you're at over a watch of officers, a supervisor, or you're the chief executive, every action that you do every day is building trust, or should be committed to understanding how is this going to build trust internally? How is it building trust externally? How do I, in the horns of a dilemma, where it appears that the public is having one expectation and the men and women that you serve have another, how do you have the wisdom of Solomon? And I'm a person of faith, and I believe that guidance and prayer and seeking to understand the real purpose that I'm here for is recognizing I'm not going to be able to serve all of them. Your message may have to fall short of some people's expectations, but nonetheless, you're committed to doing that, and you're committed that as you do that with a genuine heart, and you listen, and you're doing it, and not in times of crisis, that you're not calling people in the first time that you've spoken with them, or you haven't spoken with them in months or years, and now you're calling them for help or assistance. That's a call that is probably not going to get answered. It's going to go to voicemail, and perhaps you'll never hear back from that person. So trust is built every single day at every interaction, and it's trust that you never see built. Through my career, I found, whether as a chief or with the organization for more than 4 decades, the genuineness of an earnest, authentic effort to build the trust in communities and internally. It always came back to me to show that it was there. And now there's investments that you made in trust and relationships that fall short. And those are just, you've offered that, you've tried to build that, but the person on the other side may not be genuine, or may not have your best or the organization's best interest in mind. There may be a selfishness on their part, or even some deviant or underlying point that they're actually trying to undermine or pull away from the direction you're going in.
May have an agenda, yes.
That agenda, you just have to recognize and know that you did what you could do, that you attempted to meet them more than halfway, but some of those relationships are just not going to work. And there is a point in time, and this is something that I think a leader has to be very careful about not exercising, but there are points in time in which that's a relationship that's just never going to work. It's like having a relationship with the devil. It's just not a relationship that no matter how earnest you are, you're not going to find common ground. And you're going to need to just recognize that you're known by your enemies as well as your friends. So there's just instances in which building trust is certainly within those that have your common values, those that you wish to bring to your side, to bring to the common ground of perspective of this city, of this democracy, of our communities. But those that are nefarious actors that wish to pull away from that, and there are those out there. Those are just relationships that you need to be cordial, always professional, but also recognize that at a certain point in time, your energy is better spent in other endeavors.
Okay, that was well said. Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to flip it. How can leaders repair trust once it's damaged?
By being the first one to make the call to extend the olive branch. This is so often the time where we get our heels are locked and we get high and mighty, and my position, I don't have time for this nonsense. I don't have time to deal with someone's ego or something. You need to continue to check your own ego in that. You're a servant. I believe in servant leadership, and I believe in humility, and that you have a confidence, you have a courage about yourself, but you also have a humility to recognize you put your pants on like everyone else, one leg at a time, that there's challenges and instances in other people's lives that you may have, you may not recognize the injuries, the trauma, the history that they have, and they're coming from a different place. And so you may start off on a wrong foot. And the effort is to continue to extend yourself and demonstrate that you want to understand and you seek to find a way in which to work collaboratively together.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So we're going to pivot, and now we're going to talk about safety, readiness, and community partnership, which I'm sure you're well versed at. So the opening question I'm going to ask you is, what can faith organizations learn from public safety partnerships?
Well, I like the themes that you have here in regards to the efforts of the preparedness, the watchful, prayerful, and prepared.
Yes.
I think church leaders, if there's anything we would humbly offer you, is the systematic way in which you go about our preparedness. Preparedness is much like any other capability. It's perishable. You need to build capacity. You need to be focused and determined to understand what is the path that you're going on. What are you trying to achieve? And it's more than just an ambition. You've got to commit yourself to writing that down, to formulating a plan of action, to understanding and identifying resources that you need, to be as broad in those resource gathering as possible. Don't be stuck with just your own congregation or even some fellow ministers. What does the public, what are other aspects of the public relationships can you bring in to strengthen the plan? And then train to that plan. Don't reinvent the wheel, by the way. Look and see what other churches and other faith leaders have done. Plagiarism is the highest form of compliments. And it's easier to edit something to your specific needs than it is to author an entire plan. But once you get that plan, bring your team together, socialize it with them, translate it to them. How does this relate to the very themes that you've talked about here? How does this relate to being prepared, to being the responsible leader, the steward of that congregation, right, so that times of emergencies or crisis, you're going to do the very best, and the church will serve its membership in the highest fashion because it is prepared. It has trained and practiced. People understand their roles and their responsibilities. And this may sound really complex, but it's not. But it takes time. It takes bringing your leadership time together, identify what your threats are, identify what your challenges are, and then identify what resources do you have that can formulate a response to prevent. In law enforcement, we have something called left of the boom. And when you look at a terrorist act, you look at an act of violence, and certainly people in your in the faith community understand when a tragedy happens in a family or a crisis happens in a community, it was never just that. It just didn't come out of nowhere. There was precursors. There were things that led up to that. Preparing,
absolutely,
and improving the resiliency of your congregation is to early identify, to look at the precursors, look at the behaviors, look at the circumstances that may pose a risk to you, and then capture it there to de-escalate and keep it from escalating. And that may, again, sound complex, but I'll use an example. You have a family that is, or an individual who's very troubled within your congregation and may have a history of some violence, may have a history of turmoil in his or her own family, and now has begun to change their focus away from perhaps their focus was earlier on a member of their family or the community, but now it's on the minister or it's on the church. It's now centering and feels that it's been wronged, because of potentially illness or other circumstances, that now the focus of their attention is on the church. Well, what are the preemptive things that the church can do, recognizing that this is a soul and you have some obligation, some responsibility for service, but you also have a large responsibility to your own congregation and to the safety of your ministry. And so what are the things that can be done? And sometimes that becomes relatively harsh, meaning that can become, involving law enforcement. That may involve legal actions to prevent those individuals from accessing or being present at your house of worship. And to some, it may feel like, well, is that really Christ-like? Is that really something that we would see? Well, there is, again, you have a balancing act as a shepherd. You have a balancing responsibility to the entire congregation. So I would just say that a violence program, we know, unfortunately, that acts of violence against our houses of worship across America have not subsided. In many instances,
no, they have not.
And many times, they're not just outsiders that have an issue with a ministry or theology. They are individuals within the congregation themselves that have lost their way and are experiencing a mental health crisis. And so a preparedness plan for that, I see many, it has to be defined by the congregation, because it has to determine what layers are they willing to impose, and what controls are they willing to see in order to have a sense of safety. But ultimately, as a shepherd, as a leader of a congregation, you are responsible for having that preparedness, for having that readiness to provide for the safety and the security of a congregation to gather, to worship, to have a sense that they are in a safe place, and that you've taken the needed measures to ensure that. You can never guarantee 1,000%, but you can take safeguards that will deter, detect, and will interrupt those types of engagements.
And that's what I tell churches, Chief, when I advise them, that A, there is a duty of care responsibility, and B, that you want to avoid falling into the foreseeability trap. That there were things that a reasonable person should have been able to foresee, and you don't take those actions and put the measures in place that can address those. So I advise churches of that all the time. Well, let me ask you this, sir, and this will be a question for the resident expert here. How should churches engage law enforcement?
Early and often, kind of like voting in Chicago, as the old joke goes. And nothing. I love Chicago. It's a windy city. It's a beautiful city. I know you have a national audience, but just as a little bit of humor here. But
no problem.
But to demystify law enforcement, your local law enforcement organization, there's 17,000 of them across the United States, made up of 750,000 men and women who have committed their lives to a purpose of protecting, serving, and while they don't always get it right, the vast majority are outstanding individuals.
Absolutely.
And they have significant responsibilities and limited resources. But what oftentimes the case is that people look at them from organizations such as the House of Worship and think, well, they don't have the time, or I don't know anyone there, and I how do I start this? Mm-hmm. It starts with a hello. It starts with an invitation.
Yes.
It shouldn't be one day a year for the Law Enforcement Appreciation Day and a
right.
Churches across America, they certainly have their houses of worship on a Sunday and maybe a Sunday night. I'm a Christian myself. Wednesday night Bible study, but the other days they're quite quiet, and they sit in communities with empty lots. And I think that taking those days and those times to invite law enforcement into conversations. People will often talk about the difference between church and state, and I'm a firm believer. As a chief officer, I was nonpartisan. I'm non-denominational.
Right.
I don't wear this on my sleeve, and I haven't. To what you see, some that have gone down a path where it offends some because, frankly, there's one God in many faiths, and I'm a true believer in that. But with that doesn't mean that you have to have a distance or an isolation from them. They are a resource. They want to familiarize themselves with what are your challenges, what are your strengths, what are your opportunities, and how can you partner. Now, there are some churches that will, partner in a sense of all the way to having an officer present. I see that. I now live in Tennessee, and I see that frequently, primarily the outgrowth of some real violent instances that have happened in this state. So the church has said, "Hey, this is what we want," and they work with the local law enforcement agency, and including the associated costs for an officer to be there. But many other churches don't have that, and nor do they need it.
Right.
They do have an opportunity to invite leadership from a local agency to come in, walk the grounds, understand the security posture, what systems are in place, both physically in the sense of alarm designs and doors and access control, but also then practical, what people resources are there and what level of training and awareness do they have. And in case of emergency, a health emergency or an issue of potential violence, what's the protocols? Do they have training where they're going to meet them at the curb? Is there going to be a pathfinder there to bring them in? How are they going to communicate across both amongst the staff as well as with the congregation? What is the evacuation plan? Those are all things that can be discussed, and those officers are well equipped to give good advice and counsel Ultimately, you have to do the work.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, the church has to formulate that plan and it's responsible for how it goes. But I can say that the first and foremost, Los Angeles, LAPD, as large as the city of it is, and with as many houses of worship, we had resources at every station that would set up a meeting, would go and make those walks, and would periodically visit again to understand. And then also would be points of contact should there be something within the congregation or a threat or a danger from the community that they could reach out to and ensure whether it be added patrols or an investigative response.
Right.
That two-way relationship is going to benefit all houses, regardless of denomination, across an entire community. And when that happens, the community is safer. And then that is why law enforcement is invested in those relationships.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to pivot again. I'm going to give you a scenario, Chief.
I feel like a ballerina here. I'm doing quite a bit of pivot.
You're going to be in shape by the time you're done with this episode. Okay. I'm going to give you a scenario and then ask you some follow-up questions based on the scenario. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. It's going to involve a critical incident at a church event. Okay. A church hosting a large community event experiences a fast-moving emergency. Staff are uncertain, communication is unclear, and leadership is being looked to immediately. So now the first question is, what should happen first?
Well, the leader should reflect upon how he or she shares a great deal of responsibility for this crisis that they're now in, because in reality, law enforcement has what's called standing plans. We train to a plan. What is the mission? What is the strategies, the objectives? What tactics are we going to use? And so that if you have an emergency, you describe it. There should be a standing plan of a playbook of how we're going to go through this, and then you break that playbook out. You have a team of leadership. A pastor or a minister cannot be, this. I don't believe in the John Wayne of America, where it's just a lone cowboy. It's not one star. It's not the Texas Star way. I mean, it's more like a football team. You need
absolutely.
You need a stable quarterback, but you got to have a running back that knows the routes. You got to have a tackle. And people know how to block, and you got to.
Everyone has a role. Yes.
Everyone's got a role. Same with defense. So, but those don't come up without pre-planning. I mean, everybody walks into a game, they have a playbook. And of course, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, as Mike Tyson said.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at least you have a plan. And with that, as you have that plan and as you have that playbook, it's not going to remove all of the anxiety, all the tension, all your hair standing up on the edge. Oh my gosh. But then the point there is, as the leader, take a pause. Take it in, and then move. What's the first step that we do? We bring people together. We assess the situation. We assign roles. We communicate with each other. What are we missing? Everybody is at the table, has got a mouth, and they've got something to say, and they're not just a wallflower. They've got a mission. Do they know their mission? And then go out and begin that work. You're going to have shortfalls. You're going to have pieces that you miss. You bring them back together again, and it's an operational period. So we're going to do the next 30 minutes. This is what we want to do. These are the things we want to get accomplished. And it may be nothing more than what we call a windshield survey. What do we have?
Right.
As soon as we get that, then come back here. Now, what are the three things that we're going to do? And the three broad stroke things. And then do we have the strategy? Do we have the resources to do it? Now let's go out and communicate, in a problem-solving mode. Assess, respond, assess, respond. And can you evaluate, are we using the right strategies? How do we need to pivot? What else do we need to do next? Every disaster or emergency has stages. It's much like
absolutely.
It's much like any other emergency. You have the beginning point. The key here is that when you have an emergency, you can't control all of it. The size of it, you can't control the enormity of it. What you can control is how well you can mitigate, how well you can de-escalate, how well you can keep it from getting worse. And I can tell you that from a law enforcement perspective, and this is something that we constantly train ourselves to go big, meaning that you have a situation, you see what it is, go big with as many resources as you think. If you overestimate those resources, if you overestimate what is needed, you can always throttle back, but don't walk into a crisis. This is where you want to bring all the resources you have. You want to play those cards of that deck of trust, of resources, of readiness, and then give that feedback loop to assess it and then move forward. As a leader, I'd like to tell you that when you have an outstanding plan, you're going to have your hands in your pocket and you're going to look left and right and go, I'm missing something. I need to be doing something. Most likely, though, the reality is that's great. That means your plan's in place. Then the question is, how are you communicating to the public? How are you communicating to all the eyes and ears, depending on the enormity of this? How are you stopping that news cycle with information and stopping the speculation, stopping people that are going to try to come up with a narrative or come up with falsehoods or misdirect? Right. And that's where you have what we call a holding statement. So if something happens in your church, something happens in your congregation, that this is going to be a public event. People are going to say, we had a shooting here. We had a person inside of the congregation did A, B, or C. As you got your internal team working on that, and as the media starts flooding out there, get one of your well-spoken, calm individuals, someone who's not emotionally wrapped up in this, have them go out and give a holding statement. Holding statement meaning we have something that's happened here. It is a crisis, an emergency. I cannot give you more details than that. There's 1,000 questions we know, but we are on it. We're working through it. We're working with our local officials.
That's
and
right.
I will be back here in an hour, and I will give you the next update. And that is meant to give them something to say, because they're all looking for something to say in about a 20-second blurb on all of the local news channels. So the public information stream, having that as part of your plan, there is a time when you as a church leader need to step in front of that mic. It should not probably be the first statement, but that next hour or 2 hours later, getting in front of that, having your folks prepare you with remarks, work with law enforcement so that you recognize that there is an investigation, there is critical information that should not perhaps be mentioned or identified.
Absolutely.
There are family members that are going to be worried sick about how this impacts people that they believe may be there. And there's no worse way of finding something out like this than finding out on the news. So there's different components of this. But again, I'll go back to saying that I respect your work and with the church leadership. I respect these type of podcasts where people think, go back and reflect on this, and then look to their congregation. Okay, how am I going to do this? And how are we going to construct a plan so that when that crisis happens, there's a playbook. Now, with that said, again, I'll repeat, you can do that all day long, but when it hits, I will respect and honor the fact that we're all human, and it's going to set us up a little bit. It's going to straighten us up. Okay, but then there's have faith. Your people of faith have confidence that God is not going to put you in a position that you can't weather through, and you can't. And people are looking to you for that confidence. Leadership are purveyors of hope, and certainly as ministers, that you are purveyors of hope and a belief in a greater power, and that we're all here to serve and serve that greater purpose. So carry that with you as you move forward.
Right. Absolutely. Very well said, sir. Okay. Now, as we go to the closing statement, which is going to involve some lessons for every leader, I'm going to give you a reflection question. Now, Chief Moore, after leading at such a high level, what leadership lesson applies just as much to pastors and church leaders as it does to police leaders?
Well, we've talked a great deal about the responsibilities of leadership by a minister, of a shepherd of a congregation or a faith community. We've talked about knowing, and reflecting on that and investing in this. This is not something that's natural. This is a skill set that you can develop and needs to be developed. And so that's a heavy responsibility. But I will say in this that the closing remarks I would say is that know that as you invest in that, as you fulfill your purpose and the mission that you've been given, is that you're enough. Is that you are enough. do your best, reflect back and know that, I maybe could have done this or should have done that. But this is the old Roosevelt, the man in the arena or the woman. You are there, you're in it, you've done your best, and that's good enough, because that's important too, because in the days after that, and the reflections, the quiet times that you question yourself, did I do what I could have done? Or I made this mistake, I fell short, the plan said this, but I missed this mark. Reflection is always good, but in the humility of recognizing that all of us fall short and none of us are worthy. Those are themes that you teach in your ministry. But as a leader, nobody checks on the good leaders. Nobody checks on the strong leaders. So check on yourself, and check with your family, and check on the voice you hear most in your head, which is your own, that recognizes that you've done your best, you've left it on the field, and be proud of that, and know that it's a unique privilege to be able to respond. None of us, wish for disasters or crises or challenges to us, but at the same time, I will say, in reflection, I look at those instances as opportunities that I relish today. So I was grateful. Didn't feel like it at the time, but I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to serve.
Oh, absolutely. And just one last question, sir, and it may not be readily answerable, but I'm going to take a stab at it. I'm going to throw it out there to you. What gives you hope about leadership today?
What gives me hope is my belief in our existence, that we're here with as for a purpose, that God put us all here for a reason. I believe in my faith and in the greater good, and in the fight against good and evil that exists today. I believe in the arc of the man's progress over time, men and women, our existence, to recognize their own shortfalls and to continue to commit to being better. And I see generational change from one generation to another. And the rabbit hole is, people always say, well, this generation today is not like my generation was. And every generation that has ever been before us have all said the same thing. I think it's the wrong way. I think the generations today are more educated, more have access to more knowledge, and may not always dive into it much as scholars did back in the 1800s, when all you have is a candlelight and no television. But nonetheless, I think today we still have people that have. I look at the armed services, I look at the houses of worship, and I see leadership on every corner. I see men and women at the youngest of ages of just teenagers that are joined our armed services for all the right reasons. I see people in universities that are committed to changing the world, and I see in the Steve Jobs had an old poem about people crazy enough to think they can change the world. They're the ones that do, and I still see, and so I have hope in very perilous times, and certainly challenges that we see both domestically and the turmoil of our volatility of our elected officials, as well as across the world. But I also reflect upon America's history in 250 years. And we've had times like this before, and some would say even worse. And what it took was leaders to find common ground, to lean forward and invest in the future of America, for the freedoms that we enjoy because of the sacrifices of those before us. Not the critics, not the cynics, but for the people who believed in what it means to be a free man and woman, and stay committed. So houses of worship have a huge responsibility in that, to reinforce people's resolve, their resilience, their belief that they are in times that can that they have a purpose and can serve in, and that can improve their communities.
Outstanding. Thank you, Chief Moore. I want to thank you for joining us on the podcast and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Just stick around for 1 second while I close, sir.
Sure.
Okay. And I want to thank you, the viewers. If you want more information on securing your houses of worship, you can contact us directly at mdbconsultingagency.com/faith secure. Until the next episode, remember to be watchful, prayerful, and prepare. God bless.